Hey everyone. I don't usually make videos like these, but I feel that it's necessary to speak given what's been happening lately. So it's been a week since George Floyd has been murdered by police, and the protests that started in America have now spread all over the world. And there's a lot of people who are focusing on demonizing the small amounts, or relative to the amount of people taking part of the protest, the small amount of those who are looting and the small pockets of violence that are within the protests. But they're not focusing on the full context of why these protests are happening. Now, of course, the main thing was that George Floyd was murdered by police, and that was a very terrible thing, and my thoughts are with his family during this time. But these protests are also related to the hundreds of years of oppression that people of colour have felt. And what happened with George Floyd was sort of the thing that boiled it over, the tipping point, if you will. So I want to relate this whole thing to the current situation with the pandemic. Now, where I live in the UK, we've been in lockdown since March. So people have had to adjust to a new way of life where some of our freedoms have been taken away. We can't go out to see the people we want. We can't go to the same entertainment venues. We can't go to all the shops and things like that. So naturally, it's going to affect people's mental health. And there's lots of stories in the media that say this, that having restrictions is not good for one's mind. And that, of course, is an important thing to discuss. But imagine now in your day-to-day life, when there's no lockdown, you had to live with restrictions. Imagine every time you went out, you were feared of what's going to happen to you. Imagine every time you went to a shop, you had to keep in mind that you were going to be profiled, that people would look at you suspiciously because they think you might steal something. Or imagine that if you were wearing nice clothes, people will wonder, well, how on earth have they got that? How on earth have they attained that? Or imagine being pulled over for extra questions or extra searches, or worse, being arrested or killed, as what happened with George Floyd and many others, just because of something that you can't change, which is the colour of your skin. That is the reality that people of colour have had to live with for many, many years. It's restrictions on their normal day-to-day lives. So if you think about it that way, it kind of makes sense why people are so angry, why there are all these protests, which involve people looting and some people being violent. Because if you've had to deal with this system for many, many years, and you had people in positions of authority that were denying it, saying, oh, in a Western democracy, racism is fine, everyone's equal. Yes, on a law basis, that might be the case. But there's still many, many examples that racism exists even here in the West, where some people like to think it doesn't exist. So, and this isn't a left-wing or right-wing issue. No, none of that. It's an issue that affects people. That is the key thing. And demonizing looters and protesters does not help. We've got to think about why. What is the context? We've got to address the root causes of what's happening, because that is the way that we can move forward from it. But how do we move forward? Well, we've got to do away with ignorance. Ignorance does not help anyone. We can't expect to progress as a society if we're just ignorant about things. It starts with the simple things. You got to listen to each other, maybe even learn from each other, or just understand, empathize with one another. Because when you start doing that, you'll then realize these people have more in common than you might think. And then by working together, that's how we move on. It's no use just making this a left-wing or right-wing issue, and demonizing people who are bad, or demonizing this person, or no, none of that. It is about understanding, reaching out, building bridges, because that is how we move on from this. Now, my family lived through the apartheid regime, and so we know very well about racial injustices. And while things have definitely progressed for the better since the civil rights movement and since apartheid, that doesn't mean racism has just gone away. No, racism is still here, and it's something that does need to be addressed, as shown by all these protests. It's no use just sweeping it under the rug, pretending it's a non-issue, because it is a big issue. So next time you're wondering, why are these people being violent? Why are these people looting? Maybe just stop and think. Just stop and think about what it's like to be in their position, where they live in a system that's been told that they're not going to be as good enough as this person, or they are listening to members of authorities who are denying the issues that they're feeling. Imagine if the person that is meant to represent you denies the problems that you face. You feel that they don't truly represent you, but then if they're in denial, you then can't go to them and change that. So what are your options? We just need to understand each other. That's what it is. So I'm glad that this issue is becoming more and more of a thing, because it needs to be addressed. We can't just make this a trend and then just disappear from it. I think this is something that we'll have to keep in mind even in this backdrop of coronavirus for a very, very long time, because the struggle for racism, the struggle to end racism will continue for a long time, but it's a struggle that we are all in, it's a struggle we all must face, regardless of the colour of your skin. That is the things that I wanted to say, and I hope that you can disagree with me if you want, but I hope that you can at least heed my perspective, and maybe if that could influence your decision making perhaps. But thank you very much for listening, and I hope that things do seriously change for the better, because as much as all the bad things are happening, I am optimistic. I think that there is a chance, but we just need to be civil with each other. We just need to recognize we're all human at the end of the day. Let's not make this a team sport. Let's not do an us against them mentality. Let's learn from each other. Let's work together. That is the main message. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all soon.